By May 1943, the Auschwitz concentration camp was in serious trouble. At that time, the place housed more than 140,000 prisoners, most of them Jews, Gypsies, or political prisoners. Due to the appalling conditions they were in, a typhus epidemic had broken out and was ravaging the population of the death camp, killing inmates and guards alike. No one knew how to keep the disease at bay. It was then that, on May 24 of that same year, a new doctor arrived at Auschwitz, destined to take charge of the areas of hygiene, sanitation, and experimentation. He was not a famous man, and few knew him, but very soon he would earn a sinister reputation that would stay with him until the end of his days. It was Dr. Josef Mengele who, as soon as he found out about the typhus outbreak, made a ruthless decision to end the disease. Thereafter, due to his cold blood and his cruel scientific experiments, the doctor was nicknamed the Angel of Death. Today, in this new episode of Military History, we'll tell you everything about Josef Mengele and his most chilling experiments. Let's get started. To better understand this disturbing story, we must first go back to the origins of the doctor's career. Josef Mengele was born in 1911 in Bavaria, Germany, into an upper-class family. Since he was a child, he stood out for his intelligence and expressed a deep interest in science. Around the age of 20, he decided that he wanted to dedicate his life to medicine and the study of the human species. He was obsessed with the evolution of man and genetics, and he was particularly interested in the idea that certain people were not fit to reproduce. Mengele was a firm believer that, in order to preserve the Aryan race, all who suffered from physical or mental illness, or were considered racially inferior, had to be eliminated. Naturally, his ideas led him to the National Socialist movement and, after completing his university medical studies, he joined the Nazi Party in 1937. From then on, Mengele rose rapidly in the hierarchy of the Third Reich, aided by his family contacts and by his supposed knowledge about the human species, which impressed many Nazi leaders. At just 27 years old, he was accepted into the SS, after an investigation confirmed that his ancestors were Aryan. In 1942, in the midst of the war, Mengele was sent to Ukraine to serve as a war medic, and there he earned several medals for his acts of bravery on the front lines. A year later he obtained what he had wanted for so long, a position as an official doctor in the most important concentration camp of the Third Reich. Around May 1943, as we have already mentioned, Auschwitz was suffering from a severe typhus epidemic. Mengele's solution was to send to the gas chambers all those who showed any slight symptoms of the disease, for which 1,600 Gypsies and Jews were executed. Immediately afterwards, he ordered the murder of 600 prisoners to clear the barracks where they slept. He had the place disinfected from top to bottom, took the inmates out of the next barack to be bathed, and then sent them to the clean space. He repeated this with all the other barracks, and in this way, the epidemic came to an end. The 600 victims in the first barracks had died simply because there was nowhere to house them, not because they had typhus. The killing center was a huge sadistic playground for the Angel of Death, as he was able to conduct the most heinous investigations in the history of science. The doctor believed that through these cruel activities, he would be able to discover the formula to create the purest and most perfect human race of all. Josef Mengele's most infamous experiments were those he performed on twin brothers. He ordered that they be grouped in separate barracks, where they received better food than the rest of the prisoners, so that they maintained an adequate state of health. Hell began when the doctor brought them to his laboratory and tied them hand and foot. He gave them injections with typhus, to observe how each one reacted to the disease. He also performed unnecessary amputations on them, or transfused blood from one body to another. If any died, he murdered the surviving brother, and dissected the corpses to study the organs. Dr. Mengele's most disturbing experiment was undoubtedly when he sewed two children back to back to artificially create conjoined twins. The result was tragic, as the wounds became infected and, within a very short time, the children died of gangrene. However, it was usual for the doctor's activities to end in this way. He knew that it was one of the possible risks, but he did not care about the cost of human lives, so he continued with his sinister tests. Mengele conducted experiments with the aim of curing injuries caused by mustard gas, applying the chemical on his patients, causing them enormous pain. Usually, the doctor purposefully aggravated the injuries by inserting ground glass or wood shavings into the subjects, to test what was the maximum level of pain a person could endure. On the other hand, the angel of death was always interested in genetic malformations, and for this reason he saved the Ovitz family, a group of 7 Jewish dwarfs, from the gas chambers in order to experiment on them. He subjected them to lengthy X-ray sessions, drew blood from them to the point where they fainted, and even removed their teeth to analyze their genetic material and the cause of hereditary diseases. Despite the terrible suffering they were subjected to, all the Ovitz survived, and were able to give their testimony about the horrors they lived through with Mengele. In 1945, the luck of the angel of death seemed to come to an end. World War II was drawing to a close, and the Nazi Empire was on the brink of destruction. The doctor had to leave Auschwitz so as not to be captured by the Soviets. The most widely reported version of events claims that Mengele abandoned his SS uniform and fled disguised as a Wehrmacht soldier. He was caught by the Allies, but they misidentified him and released him, unaware that he was the most infamous doctor of all time. The doctor traveled by sea to South America, with the intelligence services of all Western countries hot on his heels. He decided to stay in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where thanks to a network of Nazi contacts he got a job as a carpenter. Although he did not change his name, he tried not to mention his past to anyone, and he maintained a low-key life. Despite the fact that most governments considered that Mengele had died under unknown circumstances, the famous Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal suspected that the angel of death was still alive. In 1959, the investigator found information on Mengele's activities in Buenos Aires in a public file, for which he alerted the West German authorities to extradite him and try him. However, the doctor was aware that they intended to arrest him, so he fled again. In 1960 he moved to Paraguay, where he settled on a farm near the border with Argentina. By then, the press had spread photographs of him along with stories of his experiments at Auschwitz. Cornered, Mengele fled to Brazil, where he lived out the rest of his years under a false identity. The authorities never managed to find him. His health gradually deteriorated. In 1979, while swimming in the sea, he suffered a stroke and drowned. 6 years later, his son, Rolf, confessed to the authorities that the mysterious man who died in Brazil was the infamous doctor. Thus, the story of the angel of death, one of the most wicked men in history, came to an end. We've reached the end of the video and we want to ask you, what do you think was Mengele's most sinister experiment? Leave us your answer in the comment box below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history.